Hello everyone. Nice to meet you at technical training session. My name is Nayeon and I'm in charge of technical support at Suprema. I joined Suprema in January last year and I'm mainly in charge of inquiries related to API. Today, we are going to explain two integration methods. Firstly, I will explain BioStar 2 API, and then YJ will explain BioStar 2 Device SDK and Sdk after 40 minutes. I'm honored to be able to meet many customers through this webinar. Today, I'm going to explain BioStar 2 DB structure and BioStar 2 new local API of BioStar 2 software. I prepared this webinar to help people who are integrated in BioStar 2 products and third-party time attendance management system or ERP system integration. Before starting this webinar, I'm going to share how can you find webinar contents after finish the webinar. There are three ways for finding webinar contents. First, email. After this webinar, Suprema team will provide the presentation and the recorded video file to the registered emails. It will take 5 days after reviewing the files with including QA list. Second, Suprema technical support site. You can also find the information including QA list to the below site. Search Suprema webinar on the site, or simply Google it. Third, SNS channel and YouTube. We will post the information to YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. I have divided my talk into 5 parts. First, I will introduce about BioStar 2 DB structure. Next, I will explain about BioStar 2 API briefly, and we will compare two types of API, that BioStar 2 local API server former and BioStar 2 new local API. And then we will look at how to use the new local API, and finally take the time to share the FAQ list about BioStar 2 new local API. Before explaining the integration of BioStar 2 API, I would like to briefly explain about the structure of BioStar 2 DB. The user requests the execution of the desired function using various interfaces such as mobile or web. The function that requested the interface requests the server through API, and the server requests the DB to perform the task. In order to accurately understand the operation and structure of BioStar 2 API, it is necessary to understand not only the functions of API, but also the structure of BioStar 2 DB. I summarized the BioStar 2 DB's tables that are mainly referred to when integrating are organized as follows. For more information about each table, I put the icon on the right bottom icon. Please refer to the article later. Let's check out the log table, which is important for time and attendance records. The log table of BioStar 2 ACDB is created based on the first generated log on the first day of each month, every month. However, the corresponding log table is created based on the device log time based on UTC-0. SRVDT is the time the log was stored on the server. This time is based on the server's time configuration. Sometimes, the customer only checks the data in the SRVDT column and is confused that the device's log is stored incorrectly. Please refer to DVDT, which is the reference time of the actual user authentication log. The column data of the EBDT is recorded based on UTC-0. Therefore, in order to calculate the actual time, it is necessary to check the data of the table where the device's time zone is stored and then calculate the time. Next, let's take a look at what BioStar 2 API is. To understand the BioStar 2 API, you first need to understand the meaning of the API words. What do you think the meaning of API? The abbreviation of Application Programming Interface is called API. This means that it's an interface for an application. What's that? As I just mentioned, the API is an application programming interface. It is a way to send and receive data from any application. If a particular site shares certain data, the APIs define how information should be requested and what data can be provided. For example, there is a situation where third-party software and BioStar 2 are integrated. If there is a need for retrieval of user information in BioStar 2 from third-party software, the third-party software and BioStar 2 do not communicate directly. The BioStar 2 API is a bridge between two different software. User information requested from third-party software is delivered to BioStar 2 through BioStar 2 API, and corresponding data from BioStar 2 that receives API is delivered to third-party software as a result of BioStar 2 API. The BioStar 2 API is needed to operate between third-party software and BioStar 2. So, when should we use the BioStar 2 API? If you want to use BioStar 2 and Suprema devices with third-party software such as a separated time attendance software, you can use BioStar 2 API. By using BioStar 2 API, user information of another system can be entered into BioStar 2, and logs stored in BioStar 2 can be exported to another system. If so, let's check what's the difference between the previous BioStar 2 local API server and BioStar 2 new local API now. By default, the two APIs have different environments. The existing local API server is divided into BioStar 2 server and local API server. To use the API, a separate API server was required. In addition, in order to use BioStar 2 local API server, a license of BioStar 2 AC standard license or higher was required, and only some functions of AC were available. However, today's BioStar 2 new local API can be used free of charge by anyone using BioStar 2 server 2.7.10 or later, and will be able to use the full AC features of BioStar 2 server. Plus, in BioStar 2 new local API, you can see the TNA key through retrieving event log. As before, you must install BioStar 2 server first, and then install local API server to use the API. However, BioStar 2 new local API can be used by installing only BioStar 2 server. Also, in order to use the Swagger UI of the BioStar 2 formal local API, a local API server must be installed, and then a local API server port and v2/docs must be entered at the end of the BioStar 2 server API address to access. But now, it is possible to access two Swagger UI of BioStar 2 new local API through swagger/index.html at the end of the BioStar 2 server address without installing additional software. The biggest difference between the BioStar 2 new local API and the previous API is that while only the limited functionality of AC was available previously, the newly released API will be able to use all the functions of AC of BioStar 2 server as an API eventually. Compared to the number of available APIs, 118 APIs were previously released, but 209 APIs will be available through BioStar 2 new local API. Let's see how we can use the BioStar 2 new local API. Swagger is a RESTful API that is a framework that automatically creates documents during development. Swagger UI provides a description of the functions of the API, and you can check the operation of the API by adding parameters directly. Let's see how to access Swagger on a larger screen. First, enter your BioStar 2 server IP address in address bar. After deleting login part of BioStar 2 server address, and entering swagger/index.html at the end of BioStar 2 connection information. You can successfully connect to Swagger that can use BioStar 2 new local API. Let's see the video showing how to log in Swagger. To use BioStar 2 new local API, you should get the session ID after calling login BioStar 2 API. Let's see how to get the session ID information. First, click on Login API at the top of the API list. To enter your BioStar 2 login information, click the Try It Out button in the upper right corner. After that, you can see the example data and modify the example data to the actual ID and password to login BioStar 2 software. After entering the login information of BioStar 2 server, and then please click the Execute button. When the API is successfully called, code 200 is returned, and the relevant data is displayed in response. In the case of the login API, at the same time as the user information is listed, a session ID that can communicate with the BioStar 2 server can be obtained. Go to response headers, you can find BS score session score ID. Copy the value of BS score session score ID. And then click Authorize button at the top of Swagger. Paste the copy value here and click Authorize button. Click Close once you click Authorize. You can see that the lock icons on the right side of each API have changed from the unlocked status to the locked status. It means that you can try to test the other APIs from now. BioStar 2 API is consisted of based on REST API. REST API typically requests the operation of DB through the following four methods such as post, put, get, and delete. Post is mainly used when generating, get is used when retrieving information, put is used to update information, and delete is used to delete it. Now, let's see how to use BioStar 2 API. Here are some examples of API uses. Let's say the administrator who manages the solution integrated with third-party software wants to search the user to add the user with 202004 user ID to the software integrated with BioStar 2. Then, you can use the API get/API/user/202004 to search the user successfully in BioStar 2, and you are able to add it to the third-party software's DB. In addition, when modifying the user information stored in BioStar 2 by modifying the user information in third-party software, if you use the API put/API/user/202004 is used, as a response of using API, you can find the updated. If user information is modified in third-party software and need to update user information stored in BioStar 2, call put/API/user/202004. BioStar 2 server will modify the information of user with 202004 user ID stored in BioStar 2 DB. Let's watch a video that recorded, retrieve, and update user information using the API. This video is an example showing how to use the update user for the username. And if you want to edit other user information, you need to put it in the corresponding parameter form. Please execute to login API first. Click Try Out button to edit the body of the API. And then click the Execute button below. When the API is successfully called, code 200 is returned and the relevant data is displayed in response. Find BS score, session score ID, and copy it in response headers. Enter the copied session ID and click Authorize button. Go to Users of API list. Click get/API/user/ID to get the user information. Click Try Out button of the API to edit. Please enter the user ID that you want to retrieve user information, and then click Execute button to receive the user information as the response. And then you can confirm that the user information of the entered user ID through response body. Can you see Nayeon to the data of name? If you compare the result of executing the API with the user information of BioStar 2, you can see the same information. Now let's update the name of this user through API. To edit the username, please click post/api/user/id from the user's APIs. Click Try It Out button and enter the user ID that you want to update the username. And scroll down, delete all parameters excepting name. Please leave only the username to be updated and delete all parameters. Edit the value of the name parameter. And press Execute button. You can see successing message from response body and the code to 200. You can also confirm the updated username to BioStar 2 software. Or you can check the results through executing get/api/user/id in API. Lastly, the event log of BioStar 2 DB saved by BioStar 2 server can be imported through API for the purpose of time and attendance as third-party software. In this case, request the BioStar 2 server through post/api/event/search to receive the saved event log information and store it in the third-party software's DB. Before showing the recorded video, let me inform you the operator parameter in Login API. There are various methods to get log data. The most common method is to retrieve log data by setting the period. In this case, please note that the value of the operator should be set to 3. First of all, please execute Login API to use another APIs in Swagger. After login, go to post/api/event/search. If you click Model, you can see parameters that are available to use for requesting API. Click Try It Out button, then you can edit the code in Edit Value window. Let's retrieve event logs based on device ID and date time. Set the conditions such as the screen. Enter the 2 columns with device_id.id and date time and the values in accordance with each column. When using the parameter of operator, please refer to the description in the model. In the case of using the operator S3 in datetime, it needs to enter two values that are available to set as a period. The first value is entered as start date time of the period, and the second value is entered as end date time of the period. And then click the Execute button below. You can see that the logs recorded between the start date and end date period of the entered device ID log is returned. You can retrieve only the authentication log separately using the filter by referring to the result of the event_types API. Detailed information about event_type_ID can be checked by executing get/API/event_types. So far, we have seen the basic method of using BioStar 2 new local API in Swagger. Introducing a tool that makes it easier to utilize BioStar 2 new local API. The tool is called Postman, and you can simply test the BioStar 2 API. Also, the history of running the API is maintained, so you can use the API more efficiently. Let's watch a video that shows how to use BioStar 2 new local API for Postman. Access the Swagger of your BioStar 2. First of all, in order to use BioStar 2 new local API, please run post/API/login. To edit the body of the login API, please click the Tryout button. And then edit the password to current admin password of your BioStar 2 server. After that, scroll down and click the Execute button. If the password is correct from the password of administrator of BioStar 2, the page will return the code 200 as the meaning of success. Let's try to use Postman for executing BioStar 2 new local API. Download Postman from Google search and install it. Click the plus button, and then you are able to send the API via Request UI. On the front of the request window, you can select the method of the API when you want to request. In the case of login API, we should select the post. And next, for entering the request URL, Please refer to the Swagger's response that you executed before. Copy the request URL from the Swagger and paste to the address bar in Postman. Before enter the body of the API, please set the content type as JSON. To execute the API successfully, to enter the body the same as Swagger. Copy the API's body from Swagger and paste to Postman. After that, click the Send button for executing the API. Scroll down, you can see the response status is 200 and the same result with the Swagger's result. If you would like to get the event log in real time, we recommend you should use WebSocket method rather than usage of BioStar 2 API. This is because once an event log is generated, it will be displayed in the monitoring section of BioStar 2 first, and then it will be saved in BioStar 2 DB after a few seconds. There is a little gap of the time between them. Therefore, you need to get the real-time log via WebSocket. Finally, I would like to share 5 questions and answers about BioStar 2 New Local API since the release of BioStar 2 New Local API. The most frequent question was whether a license was needed. The answer is BioStar 2 New Local API is a free feature available after installing BioStar 2. If you want to install the old local API server and use the old local API, you need the same license. The next question was what I should do if I'm already using local API server. Until the end of life notice, you can use the former local API server method. BioStar 2.7.10 or higher version is also compatible with the local API server. And those users can also use BioStar 2 New Local API if they install BioStar 2.7.10 or later. The third question was about whether it is possible to switch from local API server to BioStar 2 New Local API. Of course, it is possible. However, if you want to switch to BioStar 2 New Local API, an additional conversion process is required. Previously, local API server was provided in a form where the relevant parameters were processed for your convenience. Since the parameter structure of local API server and BioStar 2 New Local API does not match completely, even if the API name is the same, parameter information can be added, changed, or deleted. The fourth question is about WebSocket. You cannot monitor event log in real time through API calls. Event log can be checked in real time using WebSocket in the same way as local API server. Please refer to the Suprema technical support site for information on how to check the real-time log through WebSocket. The last question is whether it is possible for using BioStar 2 mobile app. Unfortunately, It is not possible to use BioStar 2 mobile app with BioStar 2 new local API. Since BioStar 2 mobile app is using with BioStar 2 local API server format. But as I mentioned before, they have different structure between local API server and new local API. Therefore, if you want to use the mobile app, you can use it through local API server format. It's end of my presentation. Do you have any questions? If you do not have more questions about API, we will start the webinar about SDK after 2 minutes.
Hello, everyone. So my webinar is starting right now. So before starting the webinar, I'd like to let you know that this session is for beginners or pre-sales level rather than the developer level. So welcome to today's webinar, SDK versus BioStar 2 Device SDK. This is your host, YJ. And I'm in the technical support team. The webinar is about the integration options to control Suprema devices. It would take about like 30 minutes. Shall we start now then? So the target audiences of this webinar are the pre-sales level or beginners should be okay rather than the developer level. And the and I'm pretty sure most of you guys haven't heard about the GSDK yet. So you will learn how the newly released our new solution, which is GSDK, works and how it is different from the existing solution, which is the BioStar 2 Device SDK. So today's session will be divided into 3 different categories. First, I will explain the concept of and meaning of the API and the SDK terminologies to our solution. And this is for those who are not familiar with the terminology like API or SDK. As I mentioned, this is, webinar is targeting for these beginners or pre-sales people. And second, I will explain how to use SDK with sample situations. And third, let's check the operation of the device SDK and GSDK to see how they those solutions are differ. So let's take a look at the concept and meaning of the API and SDK. So Suprema solutions have a lot of terminologies mixed up, making it difficult to distinguish it for its solution, especially if you have never heard about the API or SDK, then it will be very difficult to understand, I'm sure. So the definition of the SDK and API that I will describe today is a lot of concept. It's not a concept used only in Suprema, but this is a concept that is explained in all the technology industries as well. And API is an interface that helps one software interact with another one. It is like a communication pathway between 2 different systems. So for example, if you want to see the device information from your server, you will have to use a pathway to communicate between your server and the device, which is a API. So now you are sending a command via API that retrieves information, and the device will respond to your server with a result. In the screen, the structure shows how it works. So in other words, in conclusion, API is something like a pathway to communicate between 2 systems. We use different API depending on the request. And for example, like with the device SDK, if you want to retrieve device information, then you will use API BS to get device info. This is actual name of the API actually. So you will see a bunch of these names in the SDK manual website as well. So in the structure, you will see this command as get device info. So, or if you want to set the device time, you will use set time something API. And this is command is an API, and you will need a bunch of APIs to fully utilize the devices. Basically, SDK, the concept of a SDK includes a collection of the API. So SDK stands for Software Development Kit, which is a great way to think about it as a toolkit. SDK is a kit providing a set of tools, libraries, relevant documentation, or code samples, processes. So those tools allow developers to create software application on a specific platform. So in other words, you can see that the SDK includes a collection of the API. Then why should I use the SDK? What situation normally customers would ask for SDK? So let me briefly describe the situation in which situation you will need the SDK. So users who want to use Suprema devices can utilize the SDK when developing their own software. This means that the user does not use BioStar 2 software. There might be many reasons like BioStar 2 software does not have the desired features, or it needs to be linked with the existing customer system like HR or ERP systems. Then they would like to develop their own software. So SDK is a solution for those who want to directly develop software without using BioStar 2 software. So here is a brief look at Suprema's integration solutions. We have 4 different integration solutions in total. And among those 4 mentioned on the screen, 1 and 2 are the 2 SDK solutions I will explain in this session. And number 3 is an SVP solution that you can develop not only software, but also firmware in the device. And number 4 is the solution using the BioStar 2 software API that Nayeon just presented like 30 minutes ago. Then we understand that both SDK are integration, but what's the difference between 2 different SDKs? The Device SDK, the BioStar 2 Device SDK is a C++ library that provides with the C# sample code. Therefore, it can be useful for those who want to develop in C++ or C# environment. Most of features are implemented, including advanced features such as RS485 or weekend configuration or even Johns. On the other hand, the newly released GSDK this month supports multiple client library. So you can maybe use various languages like Java or Python, even Go language. But however, only very simple features are available, such as retrieving event logs or registering users to the device. Advanced features like RS485 or weekend configuration or Jones are not available with GSDK currently. So let's look at the structure of the device SDK and see more details. I explained what the API and SDK means in the first category, and device SDK also communicates with the devices and systems through this API. If you have ever entered the device SDK manual website, you may have seen the commands that begin with the BS2 on the bar. With this command, the device passes the necessary information to the system. So device SDK provides a collection of these API, which is command, as a library file, like .dll file or .so file, which is used in the both Windows or Ubuntu Linux environment. So the library provided by Device SDK is the C++ library. So maybe C++ development environment is the easiest way to use. So you can also develop in other languages as well, but in this case, you need a marshalling process. So marshalling process is the process of converting data to another format. It would be necessary to use structures or features defined in C++ in other languages. So basically, our device SDK sample code provides in not C++, C# sample code, which means you can see the marshalling process in it. The device SDK has a manual website. We do not distribute as an offering manual currently. Also included are, it includes C++ library and C# sample code, which is BS demo. So if you go to the GitHub site to download the sample codes and the libraries, so there is several folders on the GitHub page. SDK on the bar release on the device SDK, the GitHub is usually the official product after the former QA process. So if you want to download the compressed file with this .7z, you can see the package contents. SDK beta package is a version that contains some bug fixes that are applied in the middle, but the QA process is not passed yet. So usually it is recommended that the official product SDK on the bar release if you want to use the stable version. So let's take a look with the structure of the GSDK and see more details. Oh, by the way, GSDK means like gateway SDK. You will see why it means gateway. GSDK consists of device gateway on the gRPC server and gRPC client libraries. For those who may be not familiar with gRPC, let me briefly explain what gRPC is. gRPC is an open source remote procedure call system initially developed at Google in 2015. one of the reasons the concept of gRPC was applied is that it can support multiple languages. So let's assume one of your application will send a command to retrieve device information. Then your application one will send the command to the gRPC server. Then the command will be sent through the device gateway to the device directly. So basically, you have one more step to send a command to the device. The concept is a little bit difficult, but in conclusion, you only need to remember two things. One, in GSDK, device gateway is the one that communicates directly with the device. And second one is that GSDK can support many client languages, such as Java, Python, or even Go language by operating on the gRPC server. To help understanding the GSDK structure again with different pictures here. So basically the device gateway is the one that communicates with BioStar 2 device directly. Your client applications can connect to it using gRPC's client library. So currently, we are providing sample code in Java, C#, Go, Python, and Node.js that you can download all of them in the GitHub page. Also, we will provide more language samples as time goes by. Until now, we do have only simple APIs, and the maximum number of connection is the same as the Device SDK. GSDK also accommodates up to 1,000 devices. However, we are planning the future release for better solution. So one, master gateway, which can support up to 100,000 device connections, is under development right now. So I will explain this in the next page more. And second, advanced AC APIs. So I mentioned that GSDK doesn't support the advanced AC features such as zones or weekend configuration, but only simple configurations and features right now. But in the future, GSDK will support all the API like advanced AC features that are supported in the Device SDK, including John, Weekend, or RS485. Third one, more language support samples. So currently, GSDK provides C#, Java, Python, Go, and Node.js samples. But furthermore, GSDK is planning to support Android, iOS, or Ruby samples. So let me explain more about the first future plan first, the master gateway. By using master gateway, you can structure your system like index picture. Master gateway provides almost identical APIs as the gateway, a single gateway. So local applications will use the gateway directly, while cloud or mobile apps will use the master gateway on the cloud. So also the master gateway will have much stronger authentication and security features too. So one of the best advantages of the master gateway is that you can handle more up to maximum 100,000 devices. So this is a simple comparison of the master gateway with the device gateway. So main role of the master gateway will be managing the multiple gateways and providing additional services such as authentication, rate limiting, or user synchronization. Also, it will be easier to deploy on a cloud server or mobile since the master gateway will be optimized for the cloud or mobile services. And again, the maximum devices can be up to 100,000. Lastly, I will briefly summarize the differences between the Device SDK and the GSDK. So Device SDK is provided as a shared library, which is a 6++ library, while the GSDK is composed of the gateway and client libraries. In addition to Ubuntu Linux and Windows environment, GSDK also supports Mac OS as well. And the Device SDK provides only C# samples and C++ library, but the GSDK provides samples in various languages as well. Lastly, GSDK just has released with only simple features so far. So it does not support the advanced features, but this will be supported in the future release. Okay, that's it for today. So thank you for attending today's webinar. Since we have a limited time for the Q&A session, so I'd like to recommend raising your tickets rather than writing the questions if we have no more time. But I will open the Q&A session for like maybe 10 minutes. I don't think there is more questions from the attendees. Do you guys have more questions? Okay, Hoan? Hoan, you may talk.
Hi, YJ. Yeah, this is John from Kimaldi. I just would like to ask, because you first introduced the gRPC client and gRPC server concepts, but then after that you introduced the master gateway. So I would like to understand if the master gateway is including a gRPC server and gRPC client inside, or what is the structure?
Yeah, basic structure of the GSDK is the same in the just normal gateway and the master gateway. But the only different thing is the master gateway is like an advanced gateway. So you can handle multiple gateways, or you can deploy it on the cloud server or even on the mobile server. Do you get it?
Okay, so it's like a device gateway, but I mean it can manage a set of device gateways at the same time, many devices gateway.
Exactly.
Okay, and it's included into the gRPC server concept.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone who have questions more, or should I just close this session now? Thank you for attending today's webinar. And if you have more questions, I could answer your questions in the Q&A box, or we have limited time right now, so we can maybe handle it through the ticket systems as well. Okay, I got a very interesting question from Minsheng Lim. I will speak out for you guys. So Minsheng Lim asked the questions that will the efficiency of the GSDK be lower as compared to Device SDK as there will be additional layers. Yes, actually there is another step for you to communicate with the device, since there is a gRP server on the G SDK. But actually, interestingly, the G SDK, because we tested both solutions at the same time, but the G SDK is much faster, or scalability is much higher than the device SDK so far. So our strong solution of the integration right now, we are pretty sure the GSDK is gonna be next solution, but let's see. And thank you for attending today's webinar, and have a great day now. And this presentation files will be shared through the email and this supports website as well. And also our marketing team will share our presentations and the recording through the SNS channel as well. So if you want to listen to one more time, or if you want to share the presentation file, please make sure that you have received the email link. Thank you.